presentation focuses on the strides that have been made in the governance of community forest in the central region of Nepal, and how this has resulted in a regeneration and revitalization of the biodiversity. We will also discuss some of the challenges that have plagued these efforts. We begin by giving you a bit of context surrounding forest governance around the world. Typically, forests have been managed through a top-down centralized approach, with national governments creating policies that result in deforestation and in loss of biodiversity. This top-down management approach has ignored the needs of individuals who depend on the forest for basic needs such as fuelwood, food, fodder, and herbs, which are used for medicinal as well as cultural purposes. Within the past few decades, however, there has been a paradigm shift in the way that forests are managed, and local community members are now being given a voice with regards to forest governance. In 1990, the Nepal-Swiss Community Forestry Project, a bilateral project between the Government of Nepal and the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, otherwise known as SDC, was implemented to address several issues related to forestry management in 3 districts in central Nepal. The issues that this project aimed to resolve were governance of forest resources, poverty that people within these districts faced, gender inequality and social discrimination as a result of cultural norms, and inequity in general. The SDC worked closely with the Forest Department and multiple stakeholders such as NGOs to strengthen community forest user groups. These groups consisted of local community members who were responsible for the governance and management of the forests. One of the major successes of the project was the inclusion of women in participating and leading these groups. According to the case study, women's participation in CFUGs has exploded. For example, in the Napki Yanmara CFUG in Dolaka district, the executive committee is composed entirely of women. Additionally, more than 20% of chairpersons associated with the project are women. As mentioned previously, in Nepal's highly patriarchal, socially unequal culture, this has proven to be a huge success. As with all things, there have been challenges related to the very issues the project has been established to resolve. In the Napki Yanmara CFUG, there was a conflict between 2 elite community members wanting their daughters to chair the committee. The issue was resolved when committee members elected a different woman to take that position, but it highlighted the problem of class power and how it is used to suppress others. Additionally, when a prohibition was placed on animal grazing in the forest, women were required to work harder and longer since they had no choice but to carry fodder and forage home. This additional task could have led women having less time to get their other tasks done. And perhaps the greatest challenge women have faced is that they lack the power to make decisions on forest management policy. Although they have been given authority to make decisions concerning use of resources, there still remains a gender gap in the broader high-level leadership of forest management.
In some areas, Nepali women have taken matters of conservation into their own hands by implementing initiatives that balance community needs with ecological responsibilities. One of the issues women faced when it came to forestry management was that outsiders would come into the community's forest to harvest forest products illegally, while some members of the forest user group would engage in uncontrolled harvesting. To prevent these things from happening, women formed small group patrols that would canvass the forest regularly. Another problem these female leaders addressed was the degradation of the forest. In an effort to reverse the effects of this degradation and prevent its occurrence, the group split up the land into 5 sections where harvesting of fodder and fuelwood now takes place on each section of land on a rotating basis. Lastly, the women-led community group has responded to the needs of their ecologically fragile environment by identifying areas that are more ecologically sensitive than others and implementing conservation initiatives within that area. These initiatives include asking that members within the community plant trees on their private land to reduce their reliance on fodder and fuelwood produced in the forest, issuing guidelines that encourage users to take care of seedlings and non timber forest products while collecting materials from the forest, and supplying the members of the community group with forest materials acquired during the annual pruning and thinning practices that take place, thereby maintaining the health and well being of the forest while still ensuring that no forest materials are wasted. The aforementioned intervention techniques have yielded a fair amount of success in regards to Nepali conservation efforts. By creating forest patrol groups to prevent illegal and uncontrolled harvesting of fuelwood and fodder, the All Women Community Group was able to catch 22 people who had entered the forest for this reason within the first 6 months of implementing the patrol idea. Also, by initiating new plantations in degraded forest lands, the group was able to encourage plant regeneration and relieve some harvesting pressure within the forest. Meanwhile, the conservation practices enforced by the group on the community have made it still possible for those who collect and sell firewood to still generate a source of income. The women led community group has even created a system based on social equity that gives those who are unable to afford to pay for fuelwood the material free of cost. It is also worth noting the intervention efforts of the Nepal Swiss Community Forest Project resulted in an increase in the number of women who participated in community forest user groups. For example, the project implemented governance coaching as well as a mentorship program for leaders in the group, in an effort to help CFUGs secure funding and invest more in their local branches. After this project was implemented, women participation in these groups rose from 51 women to 71. The number of scholarships for poor girls increased from 0 to 6, and women participation in general assemblies rose from 40% to 60%, making the intervention efforts of this project a success. The primary failure of these intervention policies is that none of them address and eradicate the gender divisions that currently exist. Although women are afforded agency in regards to community organizing efforts, they are still left out of key policy decisions on forestry management. Meanwhile, men are left out of the crucial community organizing efforts which have been spearheaded by women.
This case study also shows some similarities between women in development in Nepal and women in development in the world. First of all, role differences is a universal issue. Since men and women maintain different roles in majority of their daily tasks, including forestry management, they have varying knowledge about the natural resources surrounding them. For example, women are experts of forward, fodder, and wild edibles, while men know more about the production and marketing of timber. Secondly, the intersection of gender and class is also an issue that can be observed pretty much anywhere in South Asia. The caste system is widely embedded in people's cultures in this region, even though it has been ruled illegal in many countries. This means that women in varying castes experience oppression and benefit from privilege in different ways. Ignoring these differences will not bring equality, but rather deepen the gaps between women from different castes. These global trends also reflect the main concepts of the case. As mentioned above, the different environmental knowledge of women and men is one of them, and the other two are the different participation in decision making by gender, and the gender participation in formal versus informal organization. Women can hold leadership positions in their community groups, but when it comes to policy making, they are still left out. Or in other words, women are not involved in policy decisions, but they have taken on responsibility of organizing amongst themselves to promote and sustain conservation efforts. The fact that women are the main users and direct resource managers, but not policy makers, weakens the current forestry management plan of Nepal. Based on these global trends and main concepts, we come up with the below recommendations to empower Nepali women in forestry management. First of all, women need to be involved more in policy decision making when it comes to forestry to ensure biodiversity conservation using their forestry knowledge. Secondly, men need to understand women's roles and women need to understand men's roles. They need to work together. And last but not least, within those two groups, people of different classes must also be given a voice since they suffer from oppression or benefit from privilege in different ways. So far, Nepal has managed to do a decent job in forestry management and female empowerment, but only when all of these loopholes are fixed can they achieve a solid and sustainable strategy.